broadening and deepening cultural understanding. Alltech offers non-credit language classes in person and remotely to everyone year-round. Our flexible and engaging format makes language learning a breeze for anyone. So join a community of like-minded and motivated students who are passionate about traveling and experiencing the world. Jump into our summer session with a 20% discount using the code ALLTECHFUN. Learn more at alltech.colorado.edu.
Hi, my name is Hannah Schoolgotter and I'm the Gen Z Student Chair for the Conference on World Affairs. I'm also a senior studying mechanical engineering and political science at the University of Colorado Boulder. Today I'm so excited to give you a glimpse into the technologies of the future with our panel, Transforming Entertainment with VR, AR, and Holograms. Jake Sally and his cohort of leading experts discuss the future of entertainment. Tonight we'll be joined by top experts in their field who will be discussing virtual reality, augmented reality, holograms, video game software, and much more. This technology has the potential to transform our entertainment future. Stay tuned to have your mind blown, and thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Oh, hi, it's me again. Welcome and thank you for joining the 2021 CU Boulder Conference on World Affairs virtual panel, Transforming Entertainment with Game Engines, Augmented Reality, and Holograms. We are so excited to spend time with Jake Sally and his incredible friends tonight. Tonight, we're going to take a step into the future. Each guest is going to be taking a bit of time to explain the tech that they're working on and all the cool projects that they've been exploring. Then, Jake is going to engage his friends in a lively, cerebral thunderdome of sorts. If you have any questions at any time during this session, please submit them through the YouTube chat. We will be taking audience questions toward the end of the panel. And for students only, if you'd like to join us after this event and ask questions about careers in this field, please follow the Zoom link placed in the YouTube chat near the end of the panel. And first, I'd like to welcome Jake Sally. Sally has focused on storytelling using next-generation technologies including VR, AR, AI, projection mapping, physical installations, 5G, and motion capture. Hopefully he can give us a bit of insight into what those mean. He's worked with Time Magazine to digitally recreate an immersive experience of the March on Washington and Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. He was nominated for an Emmy for his work at Riot and First Man VR. Currently, he is the COO of Jadu, an interactive augmented reality app which was recently featured in Forbes magazine. In addition to his extensive creative background, he happens to be one of the coolest people I've ever had the pleasure of talking to. Not even exaggerating. Please welcome Jake Sally to the virtual CWA stage.
Thank you, Hannah. Well, the good news is you're going to get to meet much cooler people than me in just a moment. But, I think before we dive into the Cerebral Thunderdome and a number of other pieces, it's really important for us to develop a foundation and baseline understanding of what some of these technologies are. I know I personally am quite. I'm going to just pull up a presentation that we'll run through over the next 10 minutes or so. This will be a chance to see some real world examples. Keep your phones handy. There will be actually a QR code to actually pull up some AR experiences for you to check out after this event. But let's dive right in.
Great.
So, the three key technologies that we're going to be exploring as like the baseline are going to be game engines, augmented reality, and actually holograms. So what is a game engine? A game engine is fundamentally a 3D software tool that utilizes photoreal rendering, animation, physics, AI, and more, and allows people to create things in real time. So rather than saying, I want this character to move from A to B and having to wait and wait and wait and have something be rendered out, you actually get to see that move live. You can manipulate it while it's moving. And so this is, some of the foundation of what this looks like. And we're going to get to speak with Karen, who is one of my dear friends who specializes in bringing creators into the world of Unreal Engine and game engine technology to allow them to use this software to create stories. So, you may be familiar with Unreal Engine, but not know it through things like Fortnite. So Fortnite is created using Unreal Engine. There are all sorts of crazy creative things that can be done with it. Again, characters, animation, world building. Unreal Engine is getting incredibly advanced, the ability to build full cloud systems, create lightning. The sky is really the limit at this point. And I think what I personally am most excited about with Game Engine is you've been able to create, if we go back a slide, some of these digital characters, but we're actually moving into photoreal characters.
So you're telling me that those aren't real humans?
These are not real humans. These are digitally created humans made inside of a game engine that are being manipulated through animation and motion capture. And this is really interesting. This is the baseline for a lot of this cool, innovative technology. So we're going to get to hear from some experts around that a little bit later. But again, just to recap, this is a tool that, again, it's software. You can use it on your computer, your laptop, that lets you manipulate all of these things and begin creating for yourself. And Unreal Engine is free to download. Web AR. So this is really democratized 3D content that can be delivered via your mobile device and a network connection. So really, how can I pull up my phone, and in the same way I'd use a hyperlink to watch a YouTube video or check out a website, I can actually now place 3D objects into my real world. So we're going to get to hear from Gwen, who is leading the creation of all of these 3D assets for a company called Riot, which specializes in web AR content and a number of other things. But you can see it's everything from, words over here, photoreal cars. This has to do with how much plastic is created in a year. So there's a lot of editorial and journalistic applications for it. But it really is interesting because it's something that in the last 5 or 6 years that I've worked in XR, all of this has been relegated to headsets or a downloadable app. And now being able to say, if I don't know anything and I don't want to spend $1, I can actually experience augmented reality content that's really, really compelling. Like these cars, I mean, we've had people that, they put that car in their driveway and their friend asked them, like, where you bought a new car today? So it's cool to see kind of where this is going. It's continuing to expand again as this is evolving into, again, the types of things you might see and experience yourself on something like Snapchat. Again, being able to do it through nothing more than a mobile browser. This is used a lot with shopping. Gwen can probably speak a little bit about this experience, which was a full art installation that you could put into your real world space. So we're really just beginning to tap the surface of what it means to use augmented reality through a mobile browser.
And so you don't even have to download an app.
So Riot partnered with Verizon and the Smithsonian to actually bring some of, they digitally scanned a bunch of elements from different museum exhibits at the Smithsonian that you can now place into your world through your phone. So if people want to take a screenshot of that and save it for later, or just a picture, I definitely want you to fiddle around with it, but we are going to keep going in the presentation. So bookmark it, come back to it, use it for later. And last but definitely not least, what I am personally most fascinated with, very selfishly, is holograms. So this is this idea of being able to have a person that's recorded through a process known as volumetric capture, which takes all of this digital data, all of these video feeds, and reproduces the person as a high quality 3D asset. So here's what a volumetric capture stage looks like. There are 106 cameras around for a person as they perform, and the output is really clean. So I work at a company called Jadu, and these are a couple holograms from different companies, but it's everything from Lil Nas X, Call Me By Your Name, hologram. That's not a real person. These are holograms. This is a hologram. Even with the shadows, this is a hologram. So you're really starting to see this complex convergence of reality and digital colliding in ways that are becoming much, much, much more difficult to tell apart, which can be, I think, quite fun. And so these holograms, you see them here in a vacuum, kind of standing, dancing, doing their thing. Where all this is headed is thinking about much more complex experiences with holograms. So here you're seeing kind of a music video sequence that's interactive, where you can place these holograms and a piano that you can actually play into your room, holograms bursting out of the walls. So again, this collision of what it means to have something be real or not real, or take a real person, digitize them, make them a hologram, experience them in your room. This is all kind of colliding in this moment that is a really, really, really interesting point in time. Again, because the accessibility is so large now. Things like game engines, normally reserved for beefy computers, now wildly accessible through an average laptop. Holograms, which would normally be only for these $2,000 plus headsets, are now available on your mobile device. And the ability and the ease of WebAR to bring up 3D content in general on the fly, no matter where you are, is really everything that we're going to be talking about today. I think that's
it
so.
seems like the creative possibilities with those holograms are just endless. Like even I could make like a TikTok with some of my favorite artists. So it's very cool, Jake.
Yeah, so we're going to have a wild time. We're going to get to now basically have an introduction to each of the people that'll be involved in today's panel and conversation, starting with Gwen.
Hello, Jake.
Gwen, I've had the pleasure of working with you, but for the uninitiated, can you tell me just a little bit about what does your day-to-day look like, and what are the core technologies that you're involved with?
Sure. I will actually start a little bit earlier than that. I came from old media. I used to do animation and VFX and compositing for TV and movies in movie theaters. And as the technology changed and got better and better for 3D animation, the overlap with real-time engines like Unity and Unreal got better and better, to the point where movies are now prevised in Unreal instead of doing it the hard way in Maya or another program like we did before. And that whole television, TV, advertising journey brought me into helping to design rides for amusement parks and working on little mobile games. And it eventually brought me to Riot, RYOT, which is a part of the Verizon Media brand, not the larger gaming company. Riot specializes in immersive content. We have a motion capture stage. We do volumetric capture. I work on the augmented reality offering. We have a web-based AR offering, which requires no download on the part of the user. So a lot of my time is spent optimizing assets all the way down to the point where anybody can view them through a phone. So all 3D, but lots and lots of R&D in my day.
Oh, that's so great. And yeah, I think it's so interesting because R&D is such a big process of, I think, that anything related with new technology, you're always iterating, you're always testing. And I think for you, having gone through, it sounds like you've worked with basically every medium on the planet, TV, film, amusement park rides. Over the last year, COVID has, completely upended a lot of ways of life. Why are you, tell us a little bit about what you've seen change that you're actually excited about. We're gonna do it positive. And why are you choosing to work in augmented reality when you could work, it sounds like, basically anywhere? I think you're being humble. You haven't mentioned you used to work at DreamWorks. Like, why this specific medium at this specific moment in time?
What I enjoyed about COVID was the creative push. When we finally were relieved of that 2-hour commute, when we got a chance to relax our brains a little bit during the day, at the end of the day, people turned to creating podcasts or YouTube channels. Now we have NFTs. Everybody got to experience a little bit of what we all here can do every day. And the choice for me for augmented reality is the newness and the difficulty. We are trying to do something instantly that, like you said before, would take hours to render on a complex farm. And to put together a 2-hour feature would take weeks of rendering. I like all the mistakes. I like all the tools that people have set up that are either coming from established companies like Unreal Engine, or open source experiments like Blender, which is still going strong after all this time. There are individual artists working in the space, writing tools. It's messy, and it's very exciting to work that way.
Sounds a lot like the college experience to a degree. Okay, so Gwen, thank you so much. We're gonna have you jump off video. I'm gonna bring Assad up for a moment.
Hello.
Mr. Assad. You know, I think you have a really interesting career. You are, for especially the students, I think a really big source of inspiration insofar as you're very young and you're working in this space. And I think this space is full of many technologies, many people, many companies that have been established for decades, 100 years plus, Intel, Microsoft. As someone who has, graduated in the last couple of years, I would love to hear kind of a bit of your journey and what you specialize in, and really how you came to, have, again, augmented reality and holograms be your focus.
Sure. Yeah, so I mean, I was really interested in technology at a very young age. So I got exposed to making websites when I was like 11, 12, 13. Around that time, I was growing up in Pakistan. And, not only was it kind of a creative and technical outlet for me there, it also became kind of a window into the outside world because, when you're living in a country like Pakistan, you're not assuming that you're ever going to go outside the country. I know that's often true here as well. People that grow up in small towns don't necessarily always leave, but the websites became a way for me to really be introduced to a lot of people in other countries. And then eventually, I ended up going to high school in the Netherlands, and I ended up going to art school in the US, in Bennington College in Vermont. And yeah, by the time I got to college, I was just very indoctrinated in the kind of Silicon Valley way of thinking. And when I got to a liberal arts school, that thinking was very much challenged because everyone else was not necessarily thinking like that. Where in Bennington, people were a lot more interested in making, ceramic objects rather than making apps. So in that environment, I was kind of challenged where I think developed a more nuanced understanding of technology and wanted to do something that was utilizing cutting edge technology, but was creative first, almost. That, I think it was a good transition from a design way of thinking to a expression way of thinking. So basically, I ended up trying a HoloLens headset. That was kind of my first look into augmented reality. And I tried it as an architecture student. I was studying architecture really with the intention of trying to get deeper into things like AR, because I thought that subject-space relationship that architecture explores, AR would be a relevant thing there. But I kind of, started putting out work with the AR headsets that slowly started to receive some attention and press. And we were eventually in a position where we ended up releasing an experience at the Tribeca Film Festival in 2018, this project called Terminal 3 that really, established AR storytelling as a real thing for us. And that's something that then we continued doing for the last couple of years. And, this is a longer story, and I'm sure we can dive into it further in a while. But yeah, so, I graduated in 2019. At that point, I had some, AR experiences under my belt. And now over the last year or so, we've really been working on how do we, these experiences we were building for headsets and limited distribution at festivals, how do we bring them out for everyday people that they can use and play with? Because a lot of what creatively and conceptually this work achieves, it's super valuable, and I want more people to be able to experience it.
Love that. And do you feel like, what's been the unintended positive consequence of the pandemic as we kind of pull onto the other side of it, from, a lot of the work you're doing with holograms?
Yeah, I mean, whenever a new thing comes out, it usually has somewhat of an uphill battle with the status quo and whatever exists, right? it needs to at least form some level of adoption, or some people need to at least give it a shot before it becomes a thing. So AR, like I've been sure that AR is really gonna, be a thing for a few years now. I don't think anyone really doubts that. But definitely the pandemic has very much accelerated that growth. So, we launched Jadu exactly a year ago in March 2020. And so we came into the world with the pandemic. So there were only like maybe 7 days worth of Jadu being out in the world that wasn't in a COVID lockdown. And yeah, so what we saw was that really artists and musicians, we were working with those people. So, the Lil Nas X hologram Jake was showing earlier is from Jadu. And yeah, we started Jadu exactly a year ago. And the first holograms that we had on it were great people like Pussy Riot and Vic Mensa, and we had some big names, but it really came through me calling up a bunch of people and try to, wrangle them into the studio and make something happen. But from that to now Lil Nas X being on the platform exactly with his, song that's #1 in the world right now, I think that just shows the growth that we've had in a year. And a lot of it has been because artists that otherwise would have avenues like touring to promote their work did not have those avenues and were open to more experimentation.
That's great. Yeah, the forced experimentation of the upper crust, I think, is a good side effect of the pandemic. Amazing. I'm going to let you go for a moment, but you'll be back for the Cerebral Thunderdome. Lance, can I bring you up next? Yes. Lance, thank you so much for jumping on. I know you're on the East Coast, so thank you for joining us so late in the evening. Yeah, I think you have the most kaleidoscopic career of, I think, all of us on here. And I'm really interested to hear from you and have you tell folks a little bit about, I think, what would you consider is really the narrative thread for you of like who you are that's pulled you through all these different phases from artist to education and everything in between to kind of where we are at present day?
Yeah, I think for me, in my core, I'm a storyteller, and I'm kind of storytelling agnostic. It doesn't really necessarily matter to me whether there's technology or not. I came out of a traditional background, kind of working in film and television, games, art installations, things of that nature. But I really think the thing that I'm fascinated by is human experience. And I think the moment that we're in, and a lot of the work that I do is really kind of looking at those formerly known as the audience, kind of borrowing from gaming culture, kind of realizing that there's a whole new generation that's coming up and they're makers. They're storytellers in their own right. And so I think a lot of the work that I'm fascinated to or drawn to are things that allow for a kind of almost like the things that challenge the authorship and ownership of stories, right? And so I think in my own trajectory, I think one of the things that was really powerful was kind of almost breaking from permission-based culture and realizing that I could shape my own narrative, and that narrative was something that I could carry from one place to the next. And I started to realize how storytelling was so pivotal, not only in what I was writing down on, for a script, but in the way that I was pitching, in the way that I was, working with other stakeholders, whether they be collaborators. I just needed to be able to share what a vision was and be able to tell that vision. And importantly, help people to lean into ambiguity, to lean into these things that were unknown, right? And to be comfortable with that, because a lot of the things that we're going to talk about tonight are in the very early phases of what they are. And I've done that over and over and over again throughout my career. The first all digital release of a motion picture I built my own computer, made a movie for like $900, went on to self-distribute it, netted like over 5.4 million with it, became the first all digital release of a motion picture. If I would have stopped and thought that I couldn't do it, I would have never done it. Right? Like if I would have realized how hard it was going to be. So I think the one reoccurring thing is I try to find how I can always be naive. I try to find how I can just be willing to realize the things that I don't know and to fail quickly from whatever it is, break it and learn, because you learn a lot more from what breaks than from what works.
I absolutely love that. Yeah, and I think everyone here you really do have to thrive in the chaos. Is the it's either that or have a mental breakdown. That's your two compelling options there. And so many great things really do come out of, I think, those late nights or the what ifs that you don't know. You don't know if there's a right answer. And I know for me, gravitating into this business, and so many of us are coming from traditional entertainment that have such established ways of doing things. The idea of the unknown even being possible is really intoxicating and a fun thing to play with, even I think years, decades into it. So tell me a little bit of, I know some of your research is definitely physical installation based. How has the pandemic changed kind of your perspective and how you are thinking about the storytelling process as we possibly head back to normal in the coming months?
Yeah, well, I feel incredibly fortunate in terms of, in certain respects, because it's been a very trying time all around the world, obviously, over the last year or so. I think in my own practice, I've just had this creative burst, I think I've just become fascinated by how to use web pervasive technologies, like the way that we're here in Zoom and other ways that I can build, help people to virtually connect in a time of physical distancing, right? And so I became really fascinated by drawing from all these different things that I have been doing in my practice, like design thinking, in my sense of designing worlds and world building. This notion of immersive theater when I had done things with spatial audio or had used, a variety of different emergent technologies, drawing from what I knew about how to build a world and how to design an experience that somebody could go through. And then down to, in a lot of ways, I've been subverting productivity tools and turning them into, collaborative storytelling tools. So I took a physical installation that I had at Tribeca in 2019, which is called Where There's Smoke, which 4 people moved through a burned out structure, encountered these enchanted objects that when you interacted with them, the whole room changed state, like colors came out and sounds and stories unlocked, and it was like magical, right? So I was like, oh, okay, well, that's commission. I'm supposed to take it all over the world. What am I supposed to do now? And then I was like, I reimagined it and turned it into an experience that works across Zoom and Miro, which is a whiteboarding technology. Very accessible tools for anybody that is listening right now to be able to make something, right? And I took that 4-person experience and turned it into a 60-person immersive experience. And it's been in multiple festivals, and it's traveling, well, I guess virtually traveling the world right now. So in some respects, I just kind of poured it in. And one last thing I want to say is a lot of the work that I do lasts years. Like the projects are really, really long. And so at the turn of the year, I started doing this everyday art project, and I started making a new piece of art every day and just posting it to kind of Instagram. And then later I started experimenting with NFTs with it, but we'll get into more of that later. But it's been so incredibly liberating to be able to just make something every day. And I think what's important is you can strive for perfection, but just make something every day. Just try to make it no matter what it is. The most important thing that I could say to anybody listening is just being, making the work, following something that you're passionate about, and your creative voice will start to emerge. And that's the most important thing that you could have. So over this pandemic, I've been trying to tune in to my own creative voice and trying to figure out ways to rekindle that.
I love that. Yeah, I'm excited for the Lance Weiler NFT everyday drop in 15 years. So let's get excited. Thank you so much. I'm going to have you jump off for a minute and we'll wrap up introductions with Karen, if you want to jump on.
Hi.
Hey, thank you so much. So you have a fascinating career. I think you are a really interesting bridge between creative and technology, and would really like to understand, I think similar to Lance, what you've been at some really interesting companies, we'd love for you to talk about, that have all kind of led you to this moment here at Unreal Engine. But again, what do you feel like is the the spark that carries you from job to job, or the thread that has really pulled you from these places, and would like to understand, in your day-to-day, what does your role at Unreal Engine look like currently?
Thank you. Thanks for having me. So fun to see you in this world. This is a good one. And I want to say hi to Boulder, thinking about you guys. You guys have been through a lot, and just thinking about that, and so excited to be amongst these really smart folks. So I will try to with my weight. I would say if I had any sort of connected, thing or a North Star, at the end of the day, ever since I was, a kid, I've loved to just put on the show, And so anyone ever sort of would ask, what are you doing there? What's a producer do? Or what, I was just, well, we're putting on the show, and it's as simple as that. So that enjoyment still every day gets me up. I want to rally. I want to work with artists. I want to work with storytellers. And mostly that's because I learn from them every single day. So I learn from, all the math and business folks and the legal and everything. But, it's, I have a quote that I think about quite a bit from Thelma Goldman, who is the chief curator at the Studio Museum of Harlem. And I just saw it one day in like the fray of life. And it was something like, I won't get it right, but it's just when I have questions, I go to artists. And I was like, exactly, Thelma, that is what we do. And even if it's commercial work, maybe even especially, but I've been able to, for most of my career, which is my entry point was animation, and I didn't know anything about it. And I always say the wind blew me there. And I just stayed around. I really dug it. I love how hard it is. I still don't get it. I'm still trying to understand it, but I love the bringing something to life thing. And so I've learned so much from that world and that community. And it's given me so much that to kind of bring all those things together, animation, storytelling, technology. Again, the wind kind of blew me into technology too. I don't think of myself at all as a technologist, but I have found that convergence of all those things is just the place I want to be. And that's the show I want to put on. So, and just to quickly nod to the work I'm doing with Unreal Engine, I got a little bit of exposure to what real time means at the work I was doing at Google. And I'm like, I'm in. This is how I want to do it. It's just so collaborative, and it's just so you bring so much into the now when you're in creative collaboration mode and working in real-time game engines. So that part's really cool. But what's really also very cool is that, and maybe it's the wider gaming culture and creator gaming culture, I'm not sure, but certainly what I found at this community is a real generous community, generous with not only supporting financially projects, which I am blessed to be part of and to be able to help activate, but knowledge transfer. It's really stunning. I mean, look at this group of people. We're just here. We could be having a cocktail. Lance and I could be, got a lot of stuff to say, Lance, when all this is over. But we're, I love that we all kind of are so excited about what we're doing that we want to, share it and hopefully create those opportunities for other communities.
I love that. Yeah. And I think it is definitely, the uncertainty and the community are two really big draws to kind of emerging technology and storytelling. It was definitely what pulled me out of traditional entertainment when I was working at talent agencies and production companies. And it was all very much walled off. Everyone's trying to, hide things from each other. It's very competitive, knives out. And you walk into the world of emerging technology and everyone is so friendly. Everyone is so helpful because people don't know the answer and you can't get there without that community aspect to it. So I absolutely love that. And, the show must go on. People have been promised a Cerebral Thunderdome. I think it's time. If we can get panelists.
Do I have to go away? I get to stay here.
No, you can stay here. Let's get Lance, Gwen, the Sod back in here. Hannah, if you want to contribute, you're always more than welcome. So to kick things off, we're just over a year into the pandemic and vaccinations are on the horizon. There have been so many prolific changes and new technologies that have been introduced that people are testing out and playing with. What I'm really interested to hear from you guys, what tech-centric cultural trends do you think are here to stay, and which ones do you think are going to disappear as the pandemic fades away?
Who wants to go first?
I
hope Zoom somehow changes a bit. I'd like to have less Zoom on my calendar.
Very fair. Yeah. It's been interesting. I think, I feel like I've attended a ton of different Zoom things. I did, murder mysteries. I did birthday parties. I did, there have been wine tastings, everything. And I don't feel like it's the right platform yet. And they've built in a lot of new features that I think make it really good for a range of like educational and corporate things. But yeah, maybe that's a good one. Is there one out there that we feel like, will survive, that is kind of like a digital cultural touch point for people to get together in a community way that isn't, traditional gaming? Like, I think Fortnite concerts are actually pretty interesting, but yeah, what else how are we feeling?
I think a lot of new companies emerged that were very much tackling holes left from the fact that the pandemic was happening, right? So like, for example, live stream concerts that are not game engine or anything, that are just straight up live stream concerts that have been able to get away with business models where people are willing to pay $20-$30 to watch a live stream video. I think when the pandemic's over, they will likely struggle a bit because I think the music industry's missed all the revenue that concerts usually generate. So I think people are really going to double down on concerts in a pretty significant way. And a lot of these live streaming companies are going to have a hard time for a while. But I think all the work that has happened in more real-time spaces, in as far as, for example, like there is more activity in VR spaces, and like people have, like there is social VR stuff that is bubbling up more than it was a couple of years ago. Obviously, I would like to think that AR and holograms and volumetrics have been introduced enough to big enough artists where I think those doors will continue to open, because a lot of these things do serve a new purpose as well, right? Like the intimacy of seeing someone in your room will be its own thing. Like going to a concert doesn't necessarily take away from that, and vice versa.
I think we're going to have a collective breather from technology for a little bit, to stand up and not look at this laptop, not look at this phone for a minute. But I think the social connection that we were gathering from all these online events will remain. I love renting movies with my friends and projecting them on the side of the wall. It's much better than going to a movie theater and waiting, and like maybe there's 3 people on their phones in front of you for the entirety of the movie. I think once we are able to share digital experiences in smaller groups, those will become more popular, and there'll be more innovations fighting for our attention to do that, which is fun for the consumer.
One thing that I think you'll see that will continue to be pretty fascinating will be this opportunity to connect the virtual and the physical, and these really interesting opportunities for hybrid experiences. We do this thing called the Digital Dozen. I'm the director of the Columbia University School of the Arts Digital Storytelling Lab. And last night we ran our awards, and my favorite moment in it was we staged a virtual tug of war between like over 100 people. And the way that we did that was we worked with a group called Double Take, and they built out a web browser that you could just drag the rope with your mouse or your trackpad, so you could pull the rope. But the idea was that you had to synchronize with the other people that were with you in Zoom. But that manifests itself in the real world through an actual interaction in a studio where there were ropes tied to these boxes. And every time everybody synchronized a pull, the box would start to move over just a little bit more and a little bit more. And this idea of connecting a virtual moment to a physical moment I think is something that will be really interesting, kind of moving forward. And some of that is very readily available. And I think the other part is you'll see a rise of really interesting new platforms and creative expressions that came out of this moment. I honestly believe that we're going to move into a really amazing creative kind of renaissance. Having been bottled up for so long, this opportunity to kind of move and gather again. And there's historical significance. I mean, there's amazing things that came out of both the original, like one of the earlier pandemics, the Renaissance came out of that, but then also you had the rise, the invention of kind of amusement parks came out of the Spanish flu. The rise of the studio system came off of that. There were a lot of really interesting things that developed. So what I hope though is I hope that we don't rush forward and forget what we've just gone through, and that we take some of those things that were so powerful that just happened and bring them with us into the real world.
What would you say is each of your pandemic takeaway, the biggest, the kernel of truth that you're like, I walked out of this pandemic, this is what I've learned about the world?
Are you asking that question? Oh my gosh.
Look, we're in Cerebral Thunderdome, I mean, maybe that's not Thunderdome, maybe that's just, reflective pond, but I'm interested.
It's a hard one to answer before I get my vaccine, honestly. I'm not out of it completely, mentally speaking.
I have had my vaccine, or at least one, and so I'm tempted to have fresh thinking, and tempted to make plans, and tempted to imagine, but it really doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like I can actually do that until we're in another space. And so I think you're right. I think it will be this slow evolution into Earth 3, because I guess this is Earth 2 and that will be Earth 3. And what I hope we bring with us is, in every way, it feels like collaboration is different. Of course we need to go alone and have our private creative time. But what I've seen is this, and I, was joking about Zoom, but it's definitely allowed this, collaboration that we didn't have before, because we had to make it work, and we must make it work, and we want to do our work, so we didn't let anything stop us. So, I hope we bring in this new sense of, nothing will stop us. We're going to collaborate. And I think that in turn changes the gatekeeper culture, because the gatekeepers will still be there, and it will be very comfortable to kind of go back to who do I have to get a yes, no from? But perhaps we've moved a little bit beyond that.
Yeah, I hope we'll keep this agency in our lives, whether we all had to shift at home or work on set sporadically, or even lost our jobs completely. We've had a lot more choices that were our responsibility to carry through on. And once things do start opening up, we do start going back to offices, I hope we retain the, I don't need to be here today. I am going to work more productively at home. Or, I need a mental health day. I haven't been to an amusement park in a year and a half.
I mean, I can't remember the last time I went to an amusement park. I think so. Amusement parks maybe are a good segue a little bit. We're kind of, it's interesting to think about these things that we possibly miss or don't miss anymore. I'm interested on the technology side. There's been, again, all these new innovations that have popped up, and this doesn't have to be pandemic specific, but, what would you say are technologies that you feel like are overhyped right now, that either from the investment or the interest, crazy Wired articles, that in fact, in the short term, they're not quite there, but in the long term are going to be really changing the face of society at large?
I can cop out and say 5G for that one.
Okay.
I've been the unique position to have seen it working at full power, and it is spectacular. But until it is in my home, supplying this video call and on my phone anywhere that I happen to be, needs to be a little more tangible for me.
Yeah. And do you want to give a quick bit of context to the difference between 4G and 5G for people?
Sure. The popular analogy is dripping sink to a fire hose. With 4G, we can kind of watch videos, or we can kind of sometimes video chat with our friends. With 5G, a massive computer can render scenes in Unreal for me, combine it live with somebody who's mocapping or volcapping at a different physical location, and I can intake that as a stream anywhere. It's super fast and it makes life a lot easier. Just we need more nodes, need more setup.
Yeah. Son, it looked like you had an answer.
Wait, what?
It looked like you had an answer.
Yeah, I think NFTs, I think everyone's kind of talking about them right now. And I feel like that kind of fits into the very specific framework Jake's question set up for us, which is, something that's definitely going through this, boom cycle right now, or something that has a lot of interest. And I think in terms of adoption, it's really quite phenomenal how many people are trying to jump in. Like, I've seen people that don't even make art or objects that would be good fit for NFTs kind of pivot from their otherwise successful careers to just drop something because, everyone wants to do it. And it has become this kind of quick cash grab kind of moment right now. I do think that's not going to last forever. However, still, the fundamental technology itself does have implications that are going to be unavoidable. A basic thing being this idea that every time something trades, the original artist gets a cut of that back. That's not really existed in models before, especially in the art market, right? Like we see art being sold by an artist that for, let's say $10,000, and that art gets sold for millions of dollars later, but the artist never sees any of that upside. The auction house does. And that's a model that probably can't exist after Sotheby's and Christie's have done NFT drops, right? So I think I'm also interested in what that technology is enabling in terms of a lot of applications that aren't out there yet. I think, for example, imagine for academics to be able to write research papers that are minted on the blockchain that possibly bring you back revenue every time they're cited, models that undercut, once again, otherwise middlemen. So yeah, I think it's a good example of something that's booming right now, probably won't last forever like this, but eventually will find some kind of stabilization where it will have reasonable applications.
Love that. Lance or Karen, do you want to chime in? Otherwise, I know Hannah has a question or two she wants to jump in.
On that subject, which I know close to zero about, but which we're all sort of interested in following, for me, anything that keeps author person, artist person connected to their audience and their fans, and that's a cool and healthy conversation, and the folks who filter it are less important, that's interesting. So to the extent that that's possible, blockchain's interesting, for authorship. So definitely following that, and going to the storytelling, like, what does that mean and how does that contribute? Because if really what it means is, if you don't care, it shows up, right? Like if you're putting out stuff and you don't really care and you're just trying to cause trouble or what, it'll show up. You'll be able to tell that. So I'm curious how more authors in the widest sense of the word are thinking about it as well. I know we're thinking about it a lot. Lance, it felt like you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, I think what's really interesting about NFTs is the decentralization of the way that the core network works, and definitely in terms of secondary markets and the ability to have royalties. The other side of it that's fascinating is the level of interactivity that you can start to do and what's happening with it. I've been experimenting with NFTs for a bit and weaving them into the storytelling practice and using them in interactive ways that are quite fascinating. There's certain, you can do SVG through them, you can do WebGL through them, you can use HTML containers with them. So there's a lot that you can bring in that's kind of interesting in terms of interactivity, but then also really thinking, like last night when we did the awards, during the awards, I made the awards using AI and minted them with NFTs and gave them to the people who won the awards, right? So like this idea of being able to have creative expression in interesting ways that can be performative, like all of a sudden everybody who's there can, with smart contracts, you can start to give attribution and you can start to really kind of push at the possibilities of collaboration in a form that allows for more dynamic or generative storytelling. Right? I think a lot of things with gaming engines and the potential of personalization is like one area that's fascinating. I think the ability to have NFTs within the metaverse is something that's pretty interesting, and the potential of what you could do with them in the metaverse is left to be seen. But I think there's a huge growth area, and potential. And if anybody wants to mess around with it, I'm more than happy to give you some links. And there's ways that you can do it. There's one thing I want to just plug: off-chain, not necessarily using Ethereum, which has a negative carbon footprint. There's a chain called Tezos. It's about the equivalent of a tweet, really awesome. And you can mint for like less than 20 cents. So you can experiment out, and they have a lot of really interactive, creative coders who are doing stuff on that chain. So if anybody's interested, hit me up, more than happy to share.
Love that. I had not heard of Tezos. I will check that out for sure. I want to get back to the idea of the metaverse, but I want Hannah to be able to jump in before we do.
Yeah, so this is kind of a two-part question. It was prompted by a question in the audience from Ilian. They asked, is a reality like the one portrayed in the book/movie Ready Player One something that will likely happen in our society? And if so, how soon do you think that will be? And that kind of got me thinking, you guys have talked about all these incredible applications and potential of this technology, but is there anything that scares you about the future and the potential of these? I'd love to hear about that.
Great question. Guess we're not going to wait about the metaverse. I want to jump in because I have lots of thoughts on this, but my general mentality, because I think all this technology can definitely be scary, like deepfakes are scary, all of it, the internet is scary, it's all scary. But I think fundamentally, technology is just a tool, and it sits on a gradient of people. And people can use technology for scary things, or they can use it for beautiful things. I think it's definitely naive to think that there will be no scary components to these technologies, but I think our job as artists and creators and enablers and showrunners is to make sure that that is outweighed by the beauty, and that there are protections put in place. Sure that these things, but the other thing is technology. There's no stopping technology. Like, you can't stop it. Like, if people are this idea of innovation and iteration, it's going to happen regardless. So our best hope is to really not be afraid of the technology and dive in full tilt to see how we can best utilize it. Again, for art, for utility, all of those different pieces. Challenge me.
Oh, you mean challenge you on that position?
Yeah, come on. What do people think? I mean, maybe everyone agrees with me, which I can live in that world.
Okay, I'm going to challenge you, Jake.
Yeah, let's go.
The cerebral Thunderdome, we have to have some thunder in it. I mean, look, I mean, we don't disagree necessarily, but like this example of kind of, you can use a knife to butter something or kill someone, like that comes up often. I think, like the knife you use to kill someone, the knife you use to butter or toast are very different knives. You can look at them and they're very different in many, many ways in terms of how they're designed. And so really, like, often what it comes down to is, how are the tools what tools we're building that are going to then be designing these realities that we're going to interact with or exist in, and what are those tools encouraging? And also like how the market kind of interacts with them. So often, whenever there are moments like what's happening in the crypto space right now, and you have, people like Lance who are supporting Tezos and like plugging that helps because, there are people focus on tools that, in this case, you have basically a proof of work blockchain that's going to cause a lot more environmental damage, and something that's not. The adoption of what's not is going to stop that from being a thing or not. So I think one of the really crucial things that comes back to is that we just need to be asking this question on a consistent enough basis. And often with a lot of developments of artistic mediums, like they usually come from experimentation within artists. And that happened with photography, that happened with video in many ways. With AR and VR, it's a bit harder because the devices used are so technically complicated that you do need a lot of financing in order to really impactfully be acting in that. And often the only people left that can have an impact are really huge companies, which often aren't, the best source of the most positive change necessary. So I think it's just important that people participate and have these conversations and keep the tool makers accountable as well.
I think that's great. I'm both, excited, and I don't want to be afraid of the future, but I am based on the past, right? And folks maintaining a good sense of judgment, right and wrong, and that's a barometer there. Not that we're the ones who dictate that, of course, but how do we? How it always because well, as you said, it's happening. You can't stop it, and it moves so fast. It just changes overnight. There is no stopping that. So it always feels a little bit like we're catching up, and the folks who are sort of in charge of the catching up are so slow. And so it's such a very interesting, struggle to all of that. But I think when folks like us gather, when people are curious, like that's such a great and safe space, right? And we're just exploring, and we're really exploring it, just like, humanity, right? These lovely things, but it can be a little horrifying too to think about, like, let's go live in this virtual world when our real world is like maybe sometimes not so great, like quite often not so great. So is escapist, is it that Mars isn't going to be better, it's not. Right? So why are we, and the amount of money and effort that goes to that when there are plenty of basic human needs. That might be a different panel, and one I'm certainly not an expert in, but it's a personal observation.
I like that. Interesting. Lance, Gwen, how do you feel all things metaverse and morality? Maybe that'll be the name of the next panel.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of responsibility on the tool creators. We saw that with music, where if it's easier to pirate music and movies, that's what everybody's going to do. Now it's easier to pick up a remote and it's already on my TV. I can get whatever I want to. This goes not only into the delivery of the final product, but the delivery of the creation tools as well. Having those tools in other languages with accessibility features like subtitling or scalable text opens your platform up to a wider variety of people. We touched in this panel about needing massive machines or like good graphics cards. Good luck buying one. There's a lot of programs now that are solely online. You can go to a library when libraries reopen and access an editor on a browser if you don't have a computer at home or if you don't have a phone capable of connecting to the internet. And the more we make content and we make tools to make content, the wider an audience we can get at the first pass, the better off we'll all be.
I think like I just love this quote by Buckminster Fuller, that we can be architects of the future instead of victims of it, and so I think that there's an element of, well, what does that mean? Like how can we actually be architects? And I think that there's some wonderful design practice that exists, which is called speculative design. And it's very akin to design fiction, very akin to world building. And it's this idea of being able to move past the moment that we're currently in where right now everything is kind of like, no, but we tried it, it doesn't work, we can't do it, into more of a yes and space. If anybody's ever worked with actors, yes and is a wonderful way to do improv. The moment that you say no or but, you kill the scene, right? And so this idea of like, how do we help, and I think about this a lot at Columbia with the students that I have, how do we help them to be prepared for the 21st century, right? And I think a lot of our business models, the quote Marshall McLuhan, are shaped as we march into the future through the rear view mirror, right? We're always kind of looking and trying to find these comparisons to something that was, that we thought was better, or something that we, feel more comfortable comparing it to. And so I think in some regards, in order for us to be able to have a more inclusive future, or futures, so it's plural, there's not just one. I think that some of, it's like kind of opening up that design practice, which then will filter through not, everyday life and into the tools that we're talking about, and into, systems that put in place accountability for those tools, and who owns those tools and determines how those tools are used. I was talking to my brother-in-law who is designing the next internet, like the, Internet 3. He's been working at it for a very long time. He was at Penn State, got laid off, and now he's out at the University of Berkeley. And we were talking about blockchain earlier today. And I was talking about some of the stuff that I had seen in the crypto space. And we were lamenting on a time in the mid-90s where the internet was first really kind of starting, and there was so much possibility. It could be so many things. And then we were talking about the reality of how these large organizations, these large companies kind of came in and co-opted, the way that we communicated, the way that we connected, what we saw and how we interacted. And I think a lot of that needs to be regulated in some way, where they need constitutions, right? Like there's the information flow and what we see. So on one side, I think it's very much like how we can be part of a design process. And on the other side, I think it's a level of accountability for those who have access to those tools, and so forth and so on. So I'm optimistic for the future.
Well, that techno-optimist. So quick poll beforehand as a follow-up question. Just want to quickly, how many years out are we from Ready Player One style metaverse? Karen, you're up first.
I'm on the spot. Well, I mean, some version of it, I think we're
A version of it.
a version of it. Yeah. I mean, I could definitely, we're almost there in some, right? We're already sort of there. And what's been happening is we're, of course, already learned the language of it and the way to move around. Right. So we're already sort of going to feel somewhat natural in it. I think it has something interesting. It's interesting, right? If there has to be like simple story there, but there's a reason to be there. Like, why would I go there? I hope I'm not hiding there. I hope I'm not maybe some escape, in that I want to be immersed in a good novel, that kind of escapism, right? But I don't want to go there and look at brands, and I don't want to go there and know that someone's sort of watching over where I go in my decisions, and I don't know quite if that's avoidable. So I love the idea of being in a playground. I love the idea that could be very democratized and everybody could kind of be there. I see almost this, you guys are going to laugh at me, but you could imagine like a very healthy sweetness to that. I don't know if that's where we're headed, but if you had to ask me years, I don't know. 5.
All right, 2 years. I'm throwing 20 in the mix. Lance?
Yeah, probably you're right.
For full-on immersion, like full-on?
Full
Wow.
on.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would say somewhere in a decade, in the next decade.
Okay, Saad?
Yeah, I think 10 years sounds about right for sure.
All right, Gwen?
Yeah, that 10, 15 years, we get the lighter, cheaper, faster.
5G or
yeah.
Yeah, and ideally it happens so that, this idea that Web3 is decentralized and it's 3D. And I think that is kind of the ideal scenario, that because, in order for a metaverse to be real, it also needs to really have value and meaning. And like the blockchain is kind of starting to enable some of that. Like if people are owning virtual images right now, I think owning virtual objects in these spaces are going to also make more sense. So I think that it's not just the headsets that we need. It's like a culture of multiple like metaverses that can interface with each other, and multiple worlds and communities that can kind of exist in their own spaces and also have some overlap. I think a lot of that is happening already. It's just about then eventually perceiving it in 3D.
Yeah, that's an interesting blend. Yeah, I think it's been interesting to see the evolution of headsets, but I completely agree is on the user adoption side and people even being able to organically think spatially how they interact with these 3D objects. It's beginning, but we're definitely a ways out. Okay, and Hannah, I didn't want to cut you off. Follow-up question.
All good. Just a little bit of a follow-up and a bit of based on a question from Elise. You all mentioned the responsibility in a lot of shaping this future on the part of industry, but how can the industry empower consumers to take responsibility for shaping this future, and kind of more short term, how can we all take accountability for knowing when something, for example, is fake, like a deep fake?
Great question, Elise.
Elise, you stumped us.
So to recontextualize that, what does decentralized digital policing look like by the common folk, perhaps?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's interesting.
I think,
yeah, it's funny. Yeah, go ahead.
I think we all as people can learn how to be wrong in a better way. You were asking the questions about deep fakes and when is that going to be a pivotal moment. I think it's a lot more insidious than that. The slow creep of, you can put up a tweet and say it's from anybody. You can put a picture and text and say it's from anybody. It's going to be a much more gradual deviation from the truth, or whatever you view the truth as being. So learning how to see something like that and not automatically pass it off and not call upon it as evidence. We need to take a step
I'm
back.
sorry, just to quickly jump in. Do you want to give a quick breakdown of what is a deep fake?
Yes, that would be helpful. A deep fake is a technology that anybody with a decent graphics card can run. You can take a video of an individual, lookalikes work the best, and you can take a face of a known person and feed a library of that person's face from all angles, from different lighting environments, different expressions, and deepfakes will map the second individual's face onto the body of the first one. There's several TikTok channels that do this. With the one with Tom Cruise is fantastic and creepy, and it's realistic and it works really well. And if you have the voice cadence, if you copy the body movements correctly, there's no reason to think that it's not a real video of someone. So the implications are of politicians, or there was, I think recently, an incident where a mother deep faked one of her children's school frenemies to accuse her of doing something she shouldn't have been doing. Again, it's an extension of, you can take anybody and show them doing something in a video, but we can already do that with photography. We can already do that with gossip and hearsay. So deepfake is the next level, and it will look more irrefutable. You can say, here's a video of this person doing this thing. I'm surprised we didn't get it in the last election cycle, but I'm sure it'll show up in the next one.
Yeah. Well, and I think that it really touches on this idea of, critical analysis, right? And I think people's ability, the self-policing is a little bit of checking things always, constantly. Is this real? Is this not real? In the same way that we've grown, I think, used to that with, photos. You see this sky, you're like, it's probably photoshopped. Of what does that start to look like with 3D content, with video, as it becomes easier and easier for people to fake a video of someone doing anything, dancing. There's one of Obama saying all sorts of crazy stuff. So it's, yeah, I think it really requires people day in and day out to keep a very critical eye on the media that they see, wherever they see it.
So I'm not super concerned about deepfakes. I think honestly, it's good enough right now. Someone could be deepfaking a lot. Like it's not that the technology is going to become even more accessible. That's somehow going to be a huge issue. It's the same level of an issue we had with something like Photoshop that the world kind of survived because, I think the bigger question becomes as we have more options in terms of realities, when can we trust our perception? And, especially when we're talking about 3D worlds and everything that comes with it. And yeah, it's funny because that's when like verification badges on your social media start to become important. And like, things like this have emerged in culture that didn't used to before, that are authentication that says this is true. And I think the blockchain, once again, kind of coming back to blockchain NFTs, I mean, like if we're going to go into a world where you can basically create whatever perceived vision, the authenticity of it is going to rely on the collective group of people saying whether this is real or not, which is kind of how things have been before, but it gives it this almost like authentic certificate. So I think it should be interesting to see how that emerges.
Lance, Karen, more policing? Otherwise, I have some questions that are student related. So, I think we've touched on a lot of technologies. This can, I think, often feel intimidating. I'm an English major by background. I was definitely terrified getting into all things immersive XR. How would you as a panel recommend that students of all ages kind of dive into exploring and creating with these new technologies? What are good on-ramps for people? And I think good mindsets that people should go into these things with?
Well, I think there's a lot of really wonderful, accessible things that you can find online that would allow you to kind of approximate something or play with something. There's a number of, I have a Medium article that I did that has about, I guess maybe like upwards of 40 different storytelling prototyping platforms, things that you can kind of make use of, from apps to web-based browser kind of things to subverting other tools and turning them into creative tools. I think the big thing is just doing it, just experimenting. I think that, not to plug the blockchain and NFTs again, but I think that there's an amazing thing that's happening there where it's ground floor and you can just do anything, and there's a lot of some of the core interactivity. Once you kind of learn how to do it there, you can apply it in a number of other areas. So I think the big thing is just experimentation and just playing. There's a lot of really great, both, probably there in Boulder, I would imagine there's wonderful meetup communities, but then there's wonderful meetup communities all over the place that you can tap into. And as you said earlier, the community is so welcoming and open about how to use these tools. So I think that I would just say, I know it sounds cliche, but just to do it, right? That's the hardest part, just to try. Even, there's so much that you can do even through a mobile device right now that could allow you to start to play with augmented reality, that could allow you to start to approximate things, many of which we've talked about tonight. That you could just use that device that I'm sure most people have access to.
Yeah, I want to double down on that point because I think people often are just afraid of some of this stuff because it seems so complicated from the distance. It's like programming, math, how is this going to happen? And often it's just not. Often people spend the amount of, like, I've known projects that were trying to, let's say, make a VR experience, and they spent a year trying to raise money so they could hire a developer. like young people in their late like in early 20s, I mean, a year is a lot to actually become an expert in whatever you're building, because so much of this is so new that if you choose a topic that's relevant to you, that you already like feel something strongly for, and start tackling that with any of these emerging mediums, you become an expert. It's as simple as that. And it's really easy. I'm a great example of someone who is like, I'm an expert in this industry now. I'm doing this talk right now, but I it's not like I've been doing this forever. Like by the time I had my first AR project that was seen by a lot of people, I had been doing AR development for a week. And because really at the end of the day, the concept is kind of what matters more. So for example, one of my first projects was something called Holograms from Syria, where I took images from the war in Syria and just placed them in different spaces in the US with AR. And these were flat images. These were literally Photoshop collages. I would just, cut them out and put them in. And nothing complicated, something that a beginner can start right now and have ready in half an hour with one YouTube tutorial. But the concept of the fact that you were able to see these images that you usually see either on your screens or on the newspaper, being able to see them in your space, spatially placed, taking up space, was strong enough that it became something that people wrote about, and something that was talked about enough that I got to the next step, and I was able to get funding for my next project, where once again we're like, okay, let's step it up now. Let's not do a flat image. Let's try to do something 3D. And we don't have that much money, and we ended up working with a company called DepthKit that is a great example of something where for a couple $100 spent on a cheap depth sensor that people might even have, like the Microsoft Kinect that came with the Xbox. There are cheaper sensors now, and with DepthKit, which is once again super affordable, and they're very supportive. It's coming from a creative community in New York. They let me use their stuff for free. They're like, hey, here you go, do some cool things with it. And we built a project that ended up at the Tribeca Film Festival, that ended up touring the world, that ended up, helping me raise more money and kind of keep building on top of that. So really, it's not that hard to enter, and especially the NFT space right now. There's so much to explore, and there's so many new possibilities. Literally in a week of sitting on a couple of Clubhouse conversations and combining it with what you already know that you're interested in, you're going to be an expert. And especially because there's actual money involved in this space. A lot of people that enter early are highly rewarded financially, and that's a debatable construct, like whether that's a good thing or not, but that is how things are happening right now, and it is a very significant transfer of wealth. And if you're smart and you're able to, act in the space, you can easily have resources that would allow you to do a lot with your time and creativity, and actually have an impact on how things develop.
Beautiful. Okay, I think we are 5 minutes over, but 5 extra minutes well spent. I want to thank everyone who joined tonight on the panel. I feel like we could keep going for many, many hours. So maybe we'll pick this up part 2 next year. But I want to thank everyone. Hannah, if you want to take us out.
Sure. Once again, thank you, Karen, Lance, Assad, Gwen, and Jake, for your time and for joining us. This was a really great conversation. I wish we could go into the night, but I understand that you all have jobs and such. Thank you again, the audience, for joining us. And if you would like to support our guests and learn more about their work, you can find their books, podcasts, social media accounts, and other work linked on the CWA website. Jake and Gwen will be staying on for a special talkback event just for CU students. So students, if you have any further questions about working in tech and entertainment, or just want to say hi and introduce yourself, please feel free to join the Zoom link in the chat after our panel is complete. And finally, the CWA relies on the generosity of people like you to make events like this possible. So please consider making a gift to the Conference on World Affairs, which can be done on the CWA website, www www.colorado.edu/CWA. Sorry, a little tongue tied there. And you can tune in through Sunday, April 11th for live CWA events or catch up on those you missed on the CWA YouTube channel. Thank you and have a good night.
I can by side. See you later, Lance.